So the two different names, it's kind of funny. I believe I actually rebranded within a few months of being on your podcast last time. Because when I started my company, it was Pacific Home Maintenance. And I started it as a handyman company. That's where I think I started networking with you, Alan, is I think I joined your
Hmm.
Facebook group when I was very new, like my first 6 months, when it was just me running around in my F-150 with the tools I already had in my garage and mounting
Hmm.
TVs and patching drywall for a couple of bucks here and there. And about a year to a year and a half into having that company, I had hired an employee or two. I had grown to having a pretty decent client base. And I was starting to take on bigger and bigger projects. And it's one of my favorite stories of that company that the first big project I landed, and by big, I mean over a few $1,000s, was actually a $17,000 deck remodel.
Hmm.
That was from a client that originally the way I met them is they hired me off a Facebook post to mount their TV. So
Wow.
it's kind of funny.
Amazing.
Like you
Hmm.
hear guys that run smaller handyman companies all the time talking about that transition from small jobs to big jobs. And I got my general contracting license originally because a dude that I got $200 from to mount a TV asked me if I could rebuild his deck. And I
Hmm.
didn't even barely know how to estimate. Looking back on it, it's kind of funny. That job would have been more like $30,000 if I knew how to estimate. I basically
Hmm.
broke even on it, but it was my first real general contracting job. And then I grew from there to a few years later. Flash forward to about 2022, early 2023. I had 15 employees, was doing about 2.8 million a year. Had an office, a shop, the whole shebang, kind of like everything that you're supposed to have, quote unquote. If you can't see that, I don't know if this is going to be video or audio only, but I'm doing the little quotation mark science with my hands because supposed to have is a relative term. I learned that lesson the hard way. But we had a massive overhead, a massive payroll. We were doing huge jobs. Our biggest job was $278,000. And that was a complete outdoor backyard remodel that spanned 4 or 5 thousand square feet. Pavers, patios, decks, furniture, gazebos, outdoor kitchen, hot tub, pool deck. Like it was absolutely bonkers. And what happened was in the TLDR, like short abbreviated version, is that I grew way too fast without enough systems in place, leveraged too much debt, and found myself in a spot where I had to lay off half the company in order to keep the lights on. And then I spent
Hmm.
6 months to a year fighting to try and keep my head above water and ended up closing down the company because I knew that it wasn't sustainable. We didn't have good systems in place for estimating. I tried to put people without enough training and experience into roles to fill things like salesman, admin, and project management roles. I didn't have enough experience myself as an owner to see the writing on the wall before it was too late. And I ended up at the very end, all things said and done, I was $800,000 in debt between liabilities, between working capital, between vehicles, equipment. I mean, we had 5 trucks on the road. We had a Bobcat. We had dump trailers. We had equipment. We had working capital loans. We had lines of credit. We had all the things that you see in all these like high speed, fancy entrepreneur groups is a good idea. And
Hmm.
I told myself many times that you have to spend money to make money and that leveraging debt responsibly is fine. But I didn't know that at the end of the day, the writing on the wall should have been visible to me a lot earlier that I was underwater. And I laid off half the company to save on payroll and to save on overhead. I cut down all my expenses. I got rid of my shop. I sold a lot of equipment. And I actually, in the span of 30 days, cut my overhead from $78,000 a month to $20,000 a month. And
Wow.
my payroll from $30,000 a pay period to $14,000 a pay period, and even less than that actually because I stopped paying myself. And it's still, well, we lasted 6 more months. We thought we were going to crawl our way out of the hole. But then we got behind on payments and on debt ceiling because obviously when you have $800,000 in debt to service and you're cutting your revenue from $200,000 a month to $100,000 a month and you're factoring in
Hmm.
overhead and payroll, all of a sudden there's not enough money left at the end of the month to service the debt fast enough to keep your creditors happy. So I ended
Man.
up so underwater that after spending that 6 months to a year basically fighting to get back to breaking even, I had a sit down meeting with in the same week. I had a sit down meeting with a bankruptcy attorney, with my accountant, with my business coach, and with my bookkeeper and with my project manager. And all of them told me the same thing, which was that I was at a point where I had to make a decision to either close down and shut everything down, or spend 5 to 7 years trying to claw my way back to where I started. Um, and I don't know if I don't, I'm probably rambling here at this point, but
You're good, man. Keep it
um,
going. This is
Great.
really,
yeah,
really
I,
appreciate hearing this.
I basically got to a point where I had to make the decision to either declare bankruptcy or fight my way back to the surface for 5 to 7 years. And one of the hardest things about that was I had to learn that filing for bankruptcy is a tactical tool and is not failure. And a lot of people listening to this probably have had those feelings of, man, I can't make payroll next week. Man, I can't pay my bills next week, and have felt that pressure. But until you've been through a bankruptcy, it's hard to wrap your head around what it actually means. Because a lot of people use the term bankrupt as this term that's synonymous with failure or giving up or throwing in the towel. And it basically equates to losing everything and starting over and living in a cardboard box on the side of the road somewhere. I don't think people really realize that you can file for Chapter 13 bankruptcy and be back on your feet in a couple of years and still pay all your bills in those couple of years. You might not have credit, your credit score is going to be terrible. But if you talk to almost every very successful person, almost all of them have been bankrupt at least once in their 20s or 30s. Um, a business coach that I used to work with that currently owns a very large commercial remodeling company, doing like multiple 8, 9 figures. I can't remember the exact number, but he went bankrupt twice, once in the 90s and once in 2008, and is now very successful. But as the old saying goes, the good lessons are expensive and the best lessons are really expensive.